just had a short circuit suddenly. Short circuit, so my computer went off. I was afraid it's gonna burn. Okay. So we do the same again. Let's check difficulty. Okay. But that's the way to deal with them without losing less stand, hopefully. Okay. Turn based now. Critical. How did he manage to jump here? Let's at least curse him. I think he's immune to curses. Yeah, they're immune to evil eye at least. No. Shit. -2. No one lost their last stand yet. That one is the most dangerous. Shit, why the hell did I go there with LAN? It was a perfect combination. I shouldn't have approached there. No. It was a mistake, tactical mistake. But plan is correct. Fighter should be here. The rest is correct. No. Can you stop, you fucking idiot? I went first time and then I had this fucking short circuit. It was over. Lamb became a dog. Lan was converted to dog.
There you are. I tried all. 12, 3, 6, 9, 3, 6, 9, 12.
Okay.
The 6, 9, 12, 3, and 9.
This
12.
time I will give everyone Scroll of Firebranch. I never used Firebrand.
Counterwise. Three, 6, 9, 12.
And Lan will have some arrows. Some special arrows. Oh. This never misses. This never misses. And it always 50.
Six, 9.
Ah, no more haste. That's good. So that's our disposition. Sooner or later we'll beat them like that.
12, 9. That's counterclockwise. 6, 3, 12, 9.
I should have gone for a marksman, not for a guardian. That's already a mistake. Why is a miss? I don't understand, but okay.
Let's move already.
Okay, not bad beginning.
What are you doing here? See what inevitable is doing?
Why it's not LAN, why it's Scylla.
Button of the panel. Sometimes they pause explaining to hear a distant sound before resuming their rapid movement. Who are you? Verbal exchange initiate. My designation is Erdar. I'm inevitable under the control of Valmalos, the primordial inevitable. What are you doing? Primary objective is to administer control over the threshold world simulation in order to maintain the safe existence of the Exess persona. My secondary objective is to obstruct the way to the keystone, resorting to violence is necessary. Competition of primary objective under threat. Numerous sections of the world have been attacked by anomalies. I cannot stay here. Return to the simulation.
Turn-based?
Why do you call me Exess? Unavailable information. Contact Valmalos. What's the keystone? Nexus of this world's functional capabilities is maintaining the world's logic and serves as the lock bearing the exit from this world.
Oh,
I'm assuming control. I'm countermanding your previous instructions. New order. Abandon your post. Hey, on Exess. New instructions received. Execute in order. What did you leave me there? There a keystone. Good job. Gloves of CMD against disarm. Your weapon training ability to bring a weapon and use bonus to that. Bonus increased by +4. The gloves make any weapons wielded by the bearer unnerved.
that's it. That's all. No one lost their last stand. That's it.
One morale bonus on attack rolls.
And that's it.
Bonus on damage rolls while mount.
Oof, the last combat.
There you go with gloves of
It was heavy.
channeling greater.
I lead, you follow.
It was heavy, but it's done.
That's what a puzzle was for.
Battles await.
Alright, gloves.
Not working like that.
Am I supposed to tear reality or to repair reality? What does what?
Onwards!
And what does this fucking levers do to you?
I still have package of blades remaining.
There's the house.
With more things like that. There's the Xeomites.
There was another one.
All this waiting bores. Spells not working like that.
Anything new?
That's it. That's it.
Luck mechanism.
Oh. last thing is here.
What happened now?
Here, A, it's 1. What do I have? 11, 10, and 1. 1 is definitely A. Then B. A, B, C. Book says correspondence between the numbers and letters, and numbers are like letters A, B, C, numbers 1, 10, 11. So it's ascended order. Then it should be like letter A should be 1, letter B should be 10, letter C should be 11. That's what I think, how it should be. So here goes 1. Yeah. B. Here goes 10. Why 10? Because A, B, C, 1, 10, 11. If it was A, C, B, it would be 1, 11, 10. That's easy. Okay. And now what? And now what? What happened? What happened? It was, switch is here. I thought I lost the switch. Okay. That's, and now if you click here, mythic powers, and what? What happened now? I think I received something, but what? And where is it? Oh, first memories. Whenever the owner of these memories receives a critical hit, they gain immunity against critical hits for the next 2 rounds. I think it's useless. When you receive critical hit, so you already have it. And critical hit on this difficulty, it's like 1 shot. And 1 shot, it means less stand. So critical hit is less stand. because his health is not even 500, and if enemy crits you, it's at least 500. Can be even more. So I would say it's useless thing. If everyone got it, maybe, but no. It's totally useless. One portal, another portal, third portal, or what? Those three are portals. Is this a portal or not? I think not. Portal. Must be one more portal. Maybe there is here a portal. And each portal has a okay. Now I understand why portals have this. That's portal 3. That's portal 6. That's portal 9. And must be somewhere portal 12, but I think it's somewhere here, but why I don't see it? I think here the portal that I missed. So order was, when I used this machine, it was 6, 3, 12, 9. Reverse order. It means probably that I would need to travel through those portals in the same way. Like 6, 3, 5, 9. A bit complicated all of that, but takes time to get used to it. Also red lamp. I haven't been here. It's another clock, yes? I think I didn't hit that thing before. So something happened. I should have access here somehow. It should be here. Okay, that's already something. I don't think it's so interesting to stream that. It's pure puzzle stuff. It has nothing to do with fights and so on. I don't know how to get there. I have to get here somehow. Maybe one of the portals could bring me there, I don't know. There are those two things. They should like lay down and let me pass there. So it's still like that. I don't understand how could I get here? How could I get here? Yes, I see the red lamp, but how can I get here? No idea how to get there. Really. Okay, house appeared. Okay, that's I know. How to get there? Maybe like that. Yes, that's how you get there. Incredible. Just from that house. Okay, those traps and so on. Who cared about those traps? Yeah, one more portal. Clock mechanism. That's where I put shard. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I will take a break because it's been long. And that's okay. That's okay. I'll take a break and then I continue maybe in half an hour, I don't know. Something like that. clean the area. Return. Head further. Head further down. Head further. Then load the chest. Then all this. Next go south. Next go south. Next go south. Who hits like a truck? Buff to the moon. Even according to You need to run exactly 8 order.
gonna show how to solve the puzzle, but I already did it. Is it? It shows how to solve the puzzle, man. 6, 3, 12, 9. I already did it. Fuck it. Two houses. Was I here? I was. Was the other house? But there was only one.
Pidaras.
Some corruption here. Thank God. But do I need to rest? Yes, I do.
Do I need to rest? Decide.
Iomade. Will the goddess hear me in this world? Do I have the right to pray to her, seeing as how I'm not even a real person?
Red Bread, hello. The DLC is good. It's good. I like it. I really like it. Let me see if it removes this entirely or not. It's unfair. Kinda. I'll keep it. Fuck it.
You follow.
It's a good DLC.
I'm prepared.
I will help where I can.
Let's move already. Onwards.
What the fuck is this? I was everywhere, man. I was everywhere. I never found those things that fit inside.
Move out.
God damn it. Gonna replace me now. You all freak the fuck out here. Where am I? Uh-huh. Okay, that's the exit.
Losing my temper.
Should be here.
Battle awaits. All this waiting. Spell's not working like that. Let's move already.
inevitable moron. The longer DLC than I expected. I expected something shorter. But it actually takes time.
Excess detected.
There you are.
Verbal exchange has been initiated and will be recorded in my memory.
The big snake outside Threshold had many interesting things to tell me.
That information is already known to me. Creatures of chaos cannot be trusted. You should trust creatures of order.
Uh-huh.
I am a primordial inevitable. I am the guardian of magic. My task is to monitor instances of dangerous, experimental, unsanctioned magic, and to neutralize them if they pose a threat to the integrity of the world. The magical experiment of Arilu Vorlesh, which endowed the commander of the Fifth Crusade with mythic power, has exceeded the limits of safety. A battle between the experimenter and her subject threatened to create a cataclysm even greater than the world wound. The problem required immediate resolution.
And you decided to intervene.
The extermination of the commander was deemed impermissible. Exess approves of his struggle against the world wound, regardless of his motivations. An alternative decision was made to weaken the commander to a safe level. The Exess power was isolated and placed in a secure artifact repository. One factor was not accounted for, Someshnik. They managed to disrupt the stasis of the Exess's world, fill it with anomalies, and warp the logic of its inhabitants. Warning, secure contents under threat. The repository is under attack from Someshnik's anomalies. Request, the Exess should help protect the repository. Reinforcement of the minor keystones and eradication of anomalies from the artificial creatures inhabiting this world will contribute toward this goal.
Aren't you upset that I broke your inevitables and destroy your keystone?
Their loss is not critical to the functioning of my repository.
Neon, or at least so possible way and how can you stand against me?
Forgive me, Creator. My actions are guided by the laws of the eons and will bring about the stabilization
Ні.
of the cosmos. I am
Куди?
blameless before the eons' gaze.
А, ви сьогодні в церкву.
Да, оце сьогодні. Ось. Сьогодні ще служба не наша.
І сьогодні, да?
Да.
Скільки?
Ну, коротше, 50 треба бути там кресний ход, ну він внутрі. Від столової до церкви. Потім вже служба починається до 15:10. До 12 десь служба. Десь так. До 12 буде перша служба.
Я поїхав, бо та серце болить.
Так, тобі важко дуже.
Мені важко, да. Ніночка йде в церкву, да? Ніночка, іди, принеси мені Ніночку. Церква, я візьму і так, у мене давлення. Да, мене давлення, да, Ніночка їде, да? Їде в церкву на Пасху, да? Да? На Пасху їдеш. На Пасху їде, молодець. Це Ніночка спати не буде, да?
Я буду на мене оце взяла.
Да. Позивай ласка.
Ми десь в куліч привеземо і там казали, що на чоловіка нам
Да?
прийняття дадуть.
Ну давай, так. Конкретно везе, так? Багато.
Ну, там 1,5 кілометра взяла.
А мені конкретно стало?
Проблема ж це, що це ж не курка, а це свинина більше нас.
Да.
Я можу не зривати зуба. Куліч.
Господи, меня, такое я дерьмо, дерьмо. Спасите, Господи, спасите, мой Иисусе. Mr. Twister. Siècle. 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 Спасение от евреев.
In the midst of fire, God is in control.
Then there is no absolute morality. Everything is relative, but it doesn't stop there, because morality will then be determined by power. And the people in power will be the white-suited scientists who have the programming power to modify human beings. And that is absolutely terrifying if they start doing it with no basic concept of what good and evil are. And so in the name of morality and in the name of civilization, we need to protest.
But before we get into our conversation, my name is Eric Metaxas, and this channel exists to bring you a biblical perspective on today's news, culture, and hot-button issues. If you're new here or not, welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified when new videos get posted. I want to talk to you, of course, about your brand new book. You have a brand new book out called 2084 that is doubtless a reference to 1984, and in 2084 you talk about artificial intelligence and the future of humanity. That's the subtitle, 2084, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity. I have to say that, you know, knowing you as I do and knowing your books as I do, I was surprised that you decided to leap in to this subject for a whole book. What led you to leap into the subject?
Oh, quite a few different things, actually. In the springboard that precipitated the writing of the book was being invited to give a talk on artificial intelligence and the nature of humanity. And I first of all said, no, I don't really feel, I'm not a pioneer worker in AI, though I'm interested in it. And they said, but you're also interested in Genesis and its teaching on the nature of human beings, and we'd like you to do it. So I reluctantly agreed, then did a lot of reading and realized very rapidly that this demands a serious book, because most of my life, actually, I have been interested in the interface, as you know, between science, theology, and philosophy. And of course, one of the key questions that faces everybody is what they think a human being is. And because of the advances in science and technology, we're now in a position to do things not only to individual human beings, but even potentially to the human race that would alter it permanently. And therefore that raises the question in an acute form. And of course, AI is one of the directions in which people are going. And there are all kinds of futuristic ideas out there. And here's another precipitating factor for me, the immense success of the books of Yuval Noah Harari, particularly his second book, Homo Deus. He wrote a book called Sapiens about human origins, but then he wrote Homo Deus about the future of humanity. And when I read that, noticing, by the way, it's not written by a scientist, but by a historian, I thought someone needs to respond to this. Well, many people probably have responded to it, but I thought perhaps it might be important, granted the extent to which he speculates about the future, to bring Christianity to bear on it in the hope of showing that Christianity is something intelligible and communicable and interesting and valid to say about it.
Well, let's go there, because I've heard of Yuval Noah and those books, but I have not read them. What does he say? Where's he coming from, and what does he say in those books to which you felt the need to respond?
He's coming from a strong atheistic perspective, but he's analyzing culture, and he looks at culture and makes certain statements about it that are quite questionable, such as war is decreasing and all this kind of stuff. But what focused my mind was his agenda as he regards it for the 21st century. The two main agenda items, he says, are, one, dealing with physical death. We're now in a position, he says, physical death is a technical problem. Technical problems have technical solutions. So what we're going to do in the 24th century is solve physical death from a medical perspective. Now, What he means by that is that humans will still die, but they won't have to die. There'll be a solution to the death problem. Then the second agenda item is, what are we going to do with these humans? And he says we're going to enhance their experience of happiness. How are we going to do that? We're going to change them. We've already reached beyond the stage of animals. We've developed minds and consciousness. But now we're intelligent enough to take this whole process into our own hands and start to remodel humanity, which is in flux anyway, according to their atheistic and materialistic presuppositions. And we're going to add all kinds of things: technology, drugs, biogenetic engineering, all this kind of thing. And we're going to raise human beings way above the state they're at now. So we're going to produce out of Homo sapiens, Homo Deus, the man who is God. Now, of course, there are all kinds of ancient ideas behind that, but that's the agenda. And I thought, half a minute, something needs to be said about this, because this feeds into some of the most ancient motivations behind human existence that there are.
You're talking about something which, to my mind, inevitably brings up from the first chapters of Genesis this satanic promise: ye can be as gods, or ye shall be as gods. It seems to me that it's like we've been allowed via technology to create a new kind of Tower of Babel. That what you're talking about is trying to reach the heavens on our own strength, on our own accord, to reach the heavens without God, and that folks like Yuval Noah, they sense this, and they see it as there's an irony, right? Because they claim to be strict materialists, where they don't seem to believe in a purpose, but at the same time they operate in a way as though random evolution, they would say, blind Darwinian evolution, has led us to this moment, and we have to seize it. It's kind of a Promethean thing. I mean, there's a lot that comes into it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the biblical background is entirely appropriate, because the scene as depicted in the beginning of Genesis is extremely sophisticated and, in one way, simple to understand. It's a human rebellion against God, but it is done in such a form as to leave behind a trace that's flowed down all through history, that God is against human beings. Now, Genesis paints a very different picture. God creates human beings and dignifies them with his own image, which is a very important thing. In fact, Jordan Peterson, not long ago, in his fascinating talks on Genesis, which are well worth watching, says, look, this statement, human beings made in the image of God, is the cornerstone of Western civilization. And then he breaks off and he said, man, you ignore this at your peril. But
Oké, het is tijd voor de volgende stap. Met meer dan 20.000 belastingaangiften ingediend via Accountable in 2022 is Accountable nu officieel de nummer 1 bron voor belastingaangifte in België. Deze unieke positie geeft ons nu de kans om iets te bieden waar we altijd van gedroomd hebben. Een garantie voor elke belastingaangifte die via de app wordt ingediend. Inderdaad.
the next bit of the story, the so-called fall of human beings when they rebelled against God, the temptation, we are told, was very subtle. It appealed to their aesthetic sense, their intellectual sense, and God had forbidden them to eat of one particular fruit. They could eat everything else. That's the basic parameters, the basic things that you need to have a moral dimension to life. Something forbidden, but the freedom to eat it. And the temptation came in the form that God knows in the day you eat that, you will be as gods, knowing good and evil. In other words, God is suppressing your flourishing. He's against you. And of course, God wasn't against them at all. The tree, which is so frequently said to be the tree of knowledge, was absolutely not the tree of knowledge. It was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that was a knowledge you don't want to have. And of course, when they disobeyed God, they found that they'd ruptured the fundamental relationship that they had from God at the beginning. And that has its consequences all down through history, with this sense that many people have, particularly atheists, that God, if there is a God, is against them. He doesn't want them to rise to his level. And I, of course, wish to say, with the whole authority of Christianity behind me, that that is the lie. And so, turning away from God as the source of life and immortality, the quest now comes, the ancient quest was for an elixir of life. There's a tree of life mentioned in Genesis, and God took it away from them when they rebelled. And those memories in folk memory, I think, are partly at least responsible for that search for an elixir of life, something that will convey on us living forever. And now you come straight into the 21st century, and the idea that death is a result of our biological involvement. If only we could get rid of that and upload the content of our brains onto silicon, something more permanent, we could solve the problem of immortality, and that would be a kind of elixir of life. So all of those ideas are flowing in, and they have a very powerful appeal to human beings. Think of the folks that have their bodies frozen when they die in the hope that this technology will be perfect in the next 40 or 50 years so that they can be reincarnated, so to speak, on silicon.
Well, isn't this the problem? Because we're talking about two different things, right? I mean, we're talking about many things, but specifically now, this dichotomy, they pretend that there's no dichotomy. They pretend that mind and brain are the same thing. There's no such thing as mind apart from our brain. So the idea that you can download one's brain, perhaps, but you can't download a mind. A mind is something apart from a brain. And if you're a strict materialist, you don't believe in a mind. You believe that if I can freeze my brain, that's me. There is no me apart from the physicality of my body and my brain. So clearly, they're mistaken in that. At least you and I know they're mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious that they're mistaken. For example, the brain story, my brain story or yours and mine story are obviously different. For example, I can tell you what's in my mind. And if you're a special kind of doctor, you can connect my brain up to various instruments and tell me something about what's in my brain. For example, what parts of it light up electrically when I see erythemataxis or something like this. But you cannot tell me my mind story. So you can tell me a bit about what's in my brain, but not in my mind. I can tell you what's in my mind, but not what's in my brain. And that, to me, is enough. There's plenty of other evidence as well. And what has encouraged me, and I've written a bit about this actually because it interests me greatly, that people, serious thinkers in this area like David Chalmers, are moving towards the kind of dualism that there is a mind and a brain, which has been rejected by so many people without really sufficient evidence to do so. The mind is much more complex than the brain, but they are clearly deeply connected, and we don't understand what the connection is. We don't know what consciousness is.
I was going to say, this is the key, right? In case anybody's not tracking with us, let's be clear that if somebody has an out-of-body experience, that's independent of one's brain. If I'm floating over an operating table watching them operate on me, that can have nothing to do with the pink tissue between my ears, which is on the operating table. My brain, my mind or my soul exists eternally independent of my body, which will one day rot. So this really does bring up many questions, and you just touched on the heart of it, consciousness. the idea that we can have artificial intelligence, some kind of computer that can be incredibly smart, smarter than we ever could be. Perhaps we can achieve that with technology, but to achieve consciousness is to make a leap across an abyss that never can really be accomplished. But there are many people who seem to think that it can, who seem to think it's just a matter of time. I assume that Yuval Noah is one of them. Why would they suggest such a thing? On what basis? They have any evidence for this?
Well, of course, if you reduce mind to brain, you, in a way, give yourself more hope of doing that, as you suggested. But I think we need to step back from this slightly, because another reason I wrote this book was to deal with that aspect, but to point out that there are other aspects of artificial intelligence that are already working and are very beneficial and to be greeted. And this other stuff needs to be seen in that context. And let me give you an example of that. There are two kinds of AI. What we've been talking about up to now is called artificial general intelligence. That is superintelligence, inventing a system that can do everything a human can do, but do it much better. In other words, superintelligence. Narrow artificial intelligence is the capacity of a system which consists of a computer with a lot of crunching power, a database, and it deals with one single problem. Example, X-rays of lungs. You take 1 million X-rays, there's your database. But they're labeled by the top lung doctors in the world with the respective diseases. Then I get problems with my lungs and an X-ray is taken. The AI system compares my X-ray with 1 million X-rays, recognizes the pattern, and prints out that Lennox has got this particular disease. Now, this kind of AI has been developed to such an extent, it's putting out diagnoses that are significantly better than what you get at your local hospital. And much faster, because you're really harnessing the ability of the top doctors who may live thousands of miles from you, and they're applied to your case. Now, this is marvelous and is going to help with medical diagnostics to a vast degree. And the same thing applies to the search for vaccines for COVID-19, the search for new medicines, all that kind of thing. That is really positive stuff. Now, there is a negative side even to the AI that already is operating. For example, facial recognition technology can be used to recognize criminals and arrest them, but it can also be used to create a surveillance state, as we read is being created in Xinjiang in China, where the surveillance is just beyond almost all belief, but it is operating at this very moment. And there are voices in the West that want to introduce this in our countries as well.
Waarom stappen fotografen van hun dure camera's over naar deze NASA superzoomlens? Omdat je het op je smartphone kunt vastklikken en je er op kilometers afstand geweldige foto's mee kunt maken. De speciale lens maakt gebruik van geavanceerde telescopische technologie met een 200 keer zoom. Met slechts...
Inevitably, there comes a moral component. In other words, what we can do with science, with artificial intelligence, and I know you deal with this in your book 2084, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity. What we can do is not necessarily what we should do. And so in doing science and working with technology, we human beings have to step in and make some decisions. And it seems to me that a strict scientific materialist says, no, we can do anything we like to do. There is no ought. Those of us who know the sinful temptations that we as a fallen humanity face. We know that there are things that we can do or will be able to do which we should not do. And when you talk about the surveillance state in China, I mean, we're there now. What they're doing, there's even facial recognition technology that they have. I was talking to someone on my program about it with regard to one's emotions. In other words, things that we don't even dream of, that computers will be able to do, which will be used for evil ends. And so it seems to me that the thrust of your book and what you're saying is that we have to confront this. We can't pretend that it's all good, that there's a wickedness that can come into the equation, and it's already coming into the equation in the Chinese Communist Party and what they're doing.
Narrow AI that works is like a knife. You can use a knife for surgery to save somebody's life, or you can use it to stab them. And we're seeing both. I gave you an example in medicine, saving people's lives. But now with facial recognition, you can create the most advanced totalitarian and intrusive state imaginable. And you were mentioning some of the things that appear to be happening in China. They're rolling out the social credit program right across the nation, I understand it, where every citizen is given so many points. And you can add to your points by behaving according to the norms of the state. But if you do something that is not approved of, then you'll find that your credit card may be cancelled, you can't travel, you can't book a holiday, you may lose your job and all this kind of thing. Now that is happening. They're putting up hundreds of thousands of new CCTV cameras over there. And what I found frightening in the Times article on this, the Time article on this, was people love it. Many people say, look how many points I've got, not realizing that what they're doing is sacrificing their freedom for alleged security. And that, of course, is the huge tension. And one of the leading police people in London, I believe, said that's what we need in London. And of course, back in the days of Stalin or Hitler, they would have rejoiced to have a system like this. So there are pluses and minuses. Facial recognition techniques, as you say, they can be used in a factory situation to monitor workers, and if there's any detection of any emotion that the authorities don't approve of, then that person can be called in. But think of what's happening just down the road from you in Boston, in MIT. There's Rosalind Picard, who's a Christian, a brilliant AI expert who's created a whole subject in her field called affective computing. And she's using facial recognition techniques on children who have certain diseases that make them liable to seizures and fits that can be life-threatening. And by these AI techniques, she's able to predict in certain cases when these seizures are going to happen, and therefore to medically intervene and prevent them. So there's a wonderful positive use of the thing that is enslaving people, and in the case of the Uyghurs, is putting many of them into what look very like concentration camps at the moment. So yeah. The ethics, Eric, I would say this, the whole danger in this is all of these things depend on programming a computer. The ethics need to be built in, but those will be the ethics of the programmer. And the trouble is, it's obvious to everybody that technology is outpacing ethics by many factors. And that's what's alarming people like the late Stephen Hawking, like Elon Musk, and a number of these people who have got together thousands of signatures saying, hold on a minute, we need to develop basic agreed international ethical principles to regulate what we already have, to say nothing of what we might develop in the future.
I have to say that we are homing in as a civilization now on things that they were always distant, but here they are now. It's it seems to me that it sounds to me like end time stuff. I'm not saying that it is, but it sounds to me like end time stuff in the biblical sense, because it's almost like a kind of final battle that we have people on one side who say we must not do this and this and this because this is the nature of humanity. And then you have other people on the other side, very powerful people, powerful voices, who say, no, this is the nature of humanity, and therefore we can do this. So we've never been forced to focus so clearly on what is the nature of humanity in the way that we are now, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's a worldview question. By that I mean that looking at this problem from the perspective of atheism, say, which says that human beings have no ultimate value, is very different from looking at it from the perspective, as I do and you, of Christianity, that says that human beings are made in the image of God. And the poignancy of it all and the urgency of it all is, as you say, that for the first time in history, we are now capable of doing what C.S. Lewis foresaw. That is getting involved in reprogramming, so to speak, our genetic inheritance and passing it on to all humans that follow us. I say humans because Lewis made such a powerful point. In 1940, in his book, The Abolition of Man, he pointed out that when scientists get this kind of power to modify the generations to come, now you don't have to wait for artificial intelligence for that. We already appear to have it or be very near having it. Then in the end, what they create is not a human being, it's an artifact. And he says the final triumph of humanity will be the abolition of man. And that is a hugely serious thing, it seems to me, that against which we need to protest in a credible way. And I wish to protest very strongly. You say it's an end time scenario, and in a very real sense it is, because the issues are mounting up. But I want to say, look, your quest for immortality and eternal life through artificial general intelligence, well, you're too late, because eternal life is already on offer through trusting Christ, who was raised from the dead. The death question was solved 20 centuries ago, in a sense. And the wonderful thing about the gospel, and it gears straight into this, is that you can have eternal life, which will guarantee your uploading into heaven, to use that kind of language, as a free gift. You don't have to pay to have your body or brain frozen, costing millions of dollars, but by trusting Christ, you receive that eternal life. And then, of course, the promise is that he, as the true homo deus, and here's the irony of it all, Eric, and I find this one of the most important points in this area. All of this stuff is a reaching, like the Tower of Babel. It's a reaching for heaven. It's an aspiring to be God. Christianity tells us that not that we can reach up to God, but that God reaches down to us. And the central Christian doctrine, the incarnation, is God becoming human. That's the movement in the opposite direction. God has become human in order that we can become sons and daughters of God. He gives us his life. So the central expectation of Christianity, which is a big topic, but it is the fact that this world hasn't heard the last of Jesus Christ. The true homo deus, the man who is God, will return. Now that's a hugely different scenario from the ones advanced by Harari and Tegmark and these other people. And I want to say this: if we're going to take seriously all these scenarios of the future, many of which are dystopian, like 1984, then it's time to revisit the biblical scenario that at least has the advantage of having credible evidence to back it in terms of the life, death, and resurrection of Christ.
Well, you and I...
Varen, beleven, dromen. Scheep in op de Cruise de Gouden Douro. Een uitzonderlijke navigatie door prachtige valleien. Ontdek Porto, Braga en San...
I know that there's tons of credible evidence, but there are people who couldn't possibly comprehend that there might be such evidence. You've spent most of your life presenting that evidence. I'm trying to do something similar. It seems to me that those willing to look at the facts and willing to follow the logic will find themselves, if they have any kind of an open mind, stunned to see the evidence, stunned to see that the other side really has no evidence. It has a bully pulpit, has a lot of loud voices out there. But the fact of the matter is, if you're willing to look beyond the surface, beyond those voices, the evidence is just overwhelming. That's part of what I keep thinking about, John, is that the evidence is mounting for the biblical view from a scientific perspective. You know, we can talk about the fine-tuned universe. There was nothing to discuss 50 or so years ago, almost nothing. It's only in the last 5 decades that we have more and more and more evidence that what we have could not possibly have arisen without an intelligent mind behind it. And I think that as we make that case, some people will see that it's not only not as crazy as they thought, but that it's just shockingly plausible. Something that they thought couldn't possibly be real is reality itself.
Yes, I agree entirely, and I'm a scientist, and every scientific bone in my body approves of this. You see, I'm not ashamed at all of being both a Christian and a scientist. The greatest of scientists, Newton and Kepler and Galileo and Clerk Maxwell, were all believers in God. And it was that drove their science. They saw no contradiction because they were able to distinguish clearly between a scientific explanation of how things work and a creator that created the thing that does work, without whom there would be no universe for scientists to study.
You were talking about the great irony, I guess, that people want to reach they want to reach the heavens. They want immortality. And you said, of course, that we can have that. That's the whole point of the Christian faith. But there's so many voices in the culturally elite circles, we can call them, who don't even suppose that what the Bible says might be true, or that Jesus could have risen from the dead. And I would argue that the evidence, as I said earlier, is so clear and overwhelming if you dare look at it. But that's kind of our problem, is that it's hard to get folks like that to look at it.
Yes, it can be hard to get people to look at it. And I've been working most of my life to think of ways of breaking that barrier, because unfortunately the slate has been written on, and many people have the impression that Christianity has nothing to say and science has everything to say, which is why, by the way, I wrote a little book last year called Can Science Explain Everything? And you mentioned meaning. Now, this is crucial, because the really great scientists, and among them I include the late Feynman, who was an American Nobel Prize winner for physics, absolute genius. And he saw very clearly that science is powerful because it asks questions to which it asks a limited number of questions which it can answer, mainly concerned with how things work, or the why of function, that is, why is this bit there, not there, and so on. But it cannot answer questions of ethics, for example, or morality. The laws of nature, as I think it was he who once said, don't come with a label, you should do this. But secondly, they don't answer the deepest longings of the human heart for meaning. And some very bright scientists, like another Nobel Prize winner, Erwin Schrödinger, made the point that science just doesn't deal with the question of meaning. So they've got to find meaning from somewhere. Now, one of the prejudices of the naturalistic worldview, which dominates the scientific academy these days, is there's no such thing as ultimate purpose or meaning. So the only meaning that we can derive is what we create ourselves. Now, I don't rubbish that. I think that many people, for example, see meaning, and rightly so, in their children, and they see meaning in their work and all this kind of thing. But what saddens me is that there's no ultimate meaning or purpose. And when there are so many things in our universe that speak that there is transcendence, there's something beyond, this isn't all there is, I like to encourage people at least to follow that instinct. This was one of the things that led C.S. Lewis to Christianity. And to encourage people to open their minds, as you put it earlier, to consider the possibility that there is more to it than that. I mean, after all, no one could do science if they didn't trust their mind to give you a reasonable map of what's out there.
You were saying that if somebody doesn't believe in transcendent meaning, if they don't believe in the Bible, they don't believe God exists beyond this universe, this is all there is, they say, well, we have to create our own meaning. Now, the problem with that, it seems to me, is that they are contradicting themselves. In other words, if you say that we evolved by a random mutation, via accidental processes, into who we are today, then we have no value. There is no such thing as meaning. And if we confront that, we'll be like Albert Camus or Sartre. We will see the hopelessness and try to find a way out of it. But a lot of people aren't willing to see the bleakness of what they say they believe. They pretend that they can have it both ways, and what they do really is borrow, from the meaning that they have. They don't question where it came from. They just grab it and they talk about this is important, the family's important, something's important, but they're not dealing with the fact that if this is all there is, then in fact there can be no meaning. They seem to want to have it both ways, and they aren't forcing themselves to deal with that.
Well, the way I would see that is quite simple, actually. That doing science involves believing that there's truth out there to be discovered, and that it is accessible, at least in part, to the human mind. And it was Einstein, one of the greatest physicists or scientists of all time, who realized there was something amazing in that. And he said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. In other words, he saw there's a problem. How is it that a scientist with her mind looking at the universe can understand something and reduce it to mathematics? Now, I often discuss this with colleagues, and I say, look, you do science with what you call your brain if you don't believe in the mind. Tell me about the brain. And often they will say, well, the brain in the end is a product of a mindless, unguided process. And I often have said to people, and it's been very interesting to do this, if you knew that your computer that you use every day was the end product of a mindless, unguided process, would you trust it? And I've always forced an answer, gently of course, but nevertheless I've forced an answer, and it's always been no. Now I say you have a problem, because you're inconsistent. You're telling me that what you're doing science with, that you can't trust, really. Now, I have a reason for trusting my mind, at least in part, because it is ultimately the product of the vast intelligence of a personal God, as is the universe out there. And that's why the two match together. But you don't have that. In other words, your argument, your atheism, is not simply undermining Christianity. Well, of course it tries to do that. It's undermining science. So here I sit as a scientist who is a Christian, the two sit together. And I'm suggesting to you that the conflict is not at all between Christianity properly understood and science properly understood, but the conflict, the deep conflict, as Alvin Plantinga has put it, is between science and atheism. That's where the conflict is. And I think it's very important to point these things out. Many people who take the grim view, as you called it, will say, as Dawkins did to me on one occasion, so far as I can remember, it's grim, but that doesn't mean that it's false. And I said, no, that's right, but it doesn't mean that it's true either. And so we need to investigate. And if people are interested in and looking for hope, and they ask Feynman's question, what is the meaning of it all? He's got a little book with that title, What is the Meaning of It All? It's a hugely important question. And I do believe that humans are made with eternity in their hearts. And we are questing for a solution to this. And this is why we grab at a lot of this artificial general intelligence. Is this going to bring us hope? When all the time there's a message whose credibility has been growing over the last 20 centuries that really gives us not superficial answers, but deep answers that enable us to have hope that transcends the basic barrier, and that is the death barrier.
I want to bring up before we end that if people, sometimes the way we make our decisions in life, it happened to me. In other words, if we can see something particularly negative and horrifying, that can force us in the other direction. And I think if people don't see the positive side of this, they can look at the negative side, meaning that if you look at where does the worldview take you, if you say that we can do as we like, might makes right, this is all there is, if the human being is not transcendent and sacred and have infinite value, as the Bible says, what does it lead to? Well, we know that it leads to the Nazi death camps, and today it leads to Uyghur Muslims being taken by the Communist Party and treated as nothing, treated as creatures that can be used for their organs. We can make profit. In other words, it follows logically that if you believe there is no God, who dares to say to the communist leadership in China, you mustn't do that? On what basis? I think most of us, because we're created in God's image, we recoil at the horror of using human beings in that way, in the way that we recoil at slavery or the slave trade or any of this kind of thing, and that we need to allow that revulsion to something to force us to see what it is, what that worldview is, and then to be open to the other worldview. In other words, I think there's some hope in that.
Well, I think there is, because if we follow that and realize that we revolt against this because we're moral beings, we then need to ask ourselves the question, where do these standards come from? You see, the fact that you and I and many millions of other people will revolt at this kind of stuff shows that we're responding to moral principles that are independent and outside of ourselves. Now, that's an intimation of transcendence. That's an evidence that we're morally made in the image of God, and that we recognize the difference between good and evil. And where we have to begin to look to put a break on all of this is to say, look, if we follow the atheist route, then there is no absolute morality. Everything is relative, but it doesn't stop there, because morality will then be determined by power. And the people in power will be the white-suited scientists who have the programming power to modify human beings. And that is absolutely terrifying if they start doing it with no basic concept of what good and evil are. And so in the name of morality and in the name of civilization, we need to protest and begin to ask, look, where did these basic cornerstones of our civilization come from? And that brings me back to Peterson's remark on Genesis 1:26, human beings made in the image of God. He says, man, we're going to neglect that at our peril. And we are neglecting it at our peril in our contemporary society.
The best prayer to attract wealth begins when you understand that the strongest energy in the universe is not thought, meditation, or even the law of attraction. It's brainwaves, and more specifically, a
Record fail. Record fail.
You know, the rapture, that's a demonic doctrine.
No,
it's not. But
No.
if you claim to believe in Jesus and you sit around and do nothing, then you are believing in a demonic doctrine.
Yes.
You're worthless. You
Thank you.
claim to know Jesus,
Thank you.
but you do nothing.
Yes.
Then where's your faith? Because faith's the verb,
Yeah.
and it gets up and goes. And you and I do not approve
No.
of that kind of theology nor eschatology.
No, look, you have a new book out.
Yeah.
It's called Days, D-A-Z-E, of Deception. It is selling extremely well. You're very well known. You're kind of a big deal. So I want to talk to you about your book. But first, I want to talk about this controversial thing that I said on my show about what I was interviewing a guest of mine, Benjamin Thomas, about a book he wrote. And I made some statement, not quite realizing what I was saying, and it just went insane. And I heard from you that all these pastors are angry, and we better address it. So what should we do?
Well, let's just do this. I believe that your guest said that those who hold the pre-tribulation rapture view are more prone to sit things out. They don't get engaged. They're just waiting basically for Jesus to return, so they don't run for Congress. They don't run for mayor. They don't really advance in life. In fact, if the rapture is going to happen, don't go to college. And so a lot of pastors got a hold of me and said, Jack, you know Eric, what the heck is he saying? Because we are running for Congress. We do clean the streets, and we are getting our doctorates.
You know, it was very sloppy of me. You know what the thing is? My default mode is I always kind of agree with my guests, and I'm kind of like a cheerleader. So I wasn't saying, well, now wait a minute, let's be clear. There are many people with that, you know, eschatology who are as involved as anyone, like my friend Jack Hibbs, for example, and who are preaching that we need to be involved and we need to, but I didn't say that, and I just kind of let it ride, giving the impression that everybody who holds to that view of the end times is not interested in doing what I think we need to do. And so that was a mistake, but I had no idea how many people would just be like, whoa.
Well, and let's you and I as friends, we happen to be on camera right now. What we can just do is pivot and make it good, because number one,
we just did, Jack.
Jesus taught that he was going to come back. You need to be ready for him to come back. Be watchful. And that Paul said it's the blessed hope of his imminent return. And a lot of people who do not know accurate eschatology. And your gentleman mentioned the escape. I think he called it the rescue rapture. When in reality, to just make a correction for all of our brothers and sisters out there, in Luke 21:36, Jesus described all of the horrific things that are coming upon the world. And then he said in Luke 21:36, but you pray, therefore, that you might be found worthy to escape all of these things that are coming upon the earth, to try those in the world. Coupled with John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go now to prepare a place for you, that where I
Believe
am,
that,
there
but
you
also
may be
in me.
also.
Yeah.
So that is a rapture verse. And then ultimately, Paul's writing to the Thessalonians regarding the famous rapture passage, 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18, where not everyone's going to die. At some point in time, he said there's going to be a trumpet blast.
In the twinkling of an eye.
In the twinkling of an eye.
We shall all be changed.
We shall be changed. 1 Corinthians 15. Here's the thing. Some people understood you to be thinking, or that your guest was promoting, if you believe in the rapture, these guys are kind of worthless because they sit around and do nothing.
Right.
And I want to say this, for the record, I want to use your platform to say, Eric, you know me. We have members of Congress in our church.
Right.
We have assemblymen, police chief, mayors. We've got actors. We've had a couple of rappers show up. These people are involved in their world, but they love the Lord and they believe Jesus is coming back. Listen, at any time.
Yeah.
So because that's true, we are very, very diligent about being busy about our Father's business.
Right.
So you say, Jack, you got to be crazy. Wait, you believe Jesus is coming back, but you're at NRB with Eric? Yep. But also this, I believe Jesus is coming back. That's why I'm encouraging people to register to vote and, in fact, run for local office.
What is the name of the program that you've set up?
Well, we have several, but you're talking about realimpact.us.
Okay.
Realimpact.us.
We talked about it on the program before, but I got so excited about this because you're doing. When I wrote my book
We're
letter,
doing the Bonhoeffer
No,
stuff.
I know. When I wrote my book letter to the American Church to exhort people to get involved, what you're doing at your church, to me, it's like the flagship of this in America.
I have to say.
So say it again. It's Real Impact.
It's realimpact.us.
Yeah.
And it's anybody from anywhere in the U.S. can log into that and find out what to do. But it's all about shining the light of the gospel and affecting the culture. C.S. Lewis, you're a great fan of C.S. Lewis. A.W. Tozer, they all agree that those who had heaven in mind were the most effective on earth. And
we should be. That's the point. I think my guest on that program was talking about people who twist that, and others who misapply the pre-trib idea. And so I was agreeing with him about how it's bad is if you misapply it.
Yeah.
Not if you hold to that view, but if you misapply the view. Yeah. And a lot of people misunderstood it.
So can we bury it right here for everybody?
I hope so.
Some people confused it as, the rapture, that's a demonic doctrine. No, it's not.
No.
But if you claim to believe in Jesus and you sit around and do nothing, then you are believing in a demonic doctrine.
Yes.
You're worthless. You claim to know Jesus, but you do nothing.
Yes.
Then where's your faith? Because faith's the verb, and it gets up and goes. And you and I do not approve of that kind of theology nor eschatology.
No, that is really that is a demonic doctrine. Well, thank you very much.
Well, I love you. That's
I appreciate that. Well, it's important. It's just so funny because when you're talking, I think what happens if you're doing a show, you become freer and freer. You're not really thinking sometimes about how people might take what you say. So that was one of those weird situations. But in any event, thanks for helping me clarify it.
Well, only because I love the Eric Metaxas.
I love thee back, my friend. So I want to talk to you about your book now. Now, what is the name of your church? I say to people all around the country, if you're going to a church that is not alive to where we are in this moment, that is just kind of like quote-unquote preaching the gospel and ignoring the evil that is rising around us and is not standing against the evil and working against it and doing what we can, just like if the slave trade were happening, Wilberforce called believers to stand against this. Not just say just do church and the slave trade is something we have to live with. Like, no, as believers we're called to stand against it and politically to shut it down and politically to shut down slavery. Obviously in the 19th century in this country, we shut that down. There were people who believed had a moral conviction coming out of Scripture that we're supposed to be actively engaged. And I say to people, if you're going to a church that doesn't get this, get out of that church.
I agree.
But if they say, well, where should I go? I say, well, you should watch Jack Hibbs while you're finding a local church. I'm serious. I say you should go online and watch my friend Pastor Jack Hibbs. And I know there are tons of people that watch you every Sunday, And so if
Jack
people
Hibbs.
do want to find
Jack
you, where do
Hibbs.
they go to look? I want to say this right out of the gate. Where do
Jack
they
Hibbs.
find you online?
It's very simple because from this location you can go everywhere. It's jackhibbs.com. Jackhibbs.com will take you to our church services, our the Real Life Network, podcasting, various special programming. Simplest way, jackhibbs.com, and from there you can go everywhere.
Okay, got it? Good. All right, so I want to talk to you about the book.
Yep.
Is this the first book you wrote? No.
No, it's not. But the other one did so poorly that nobody really knows we wrote it. Lisa and I wrote a book some years ago with David C. Cook Publishing called Turn Around at Home, leaving a better spiritual legacy than what you received. So in that first book, I came from a non-Christian home, non-Christian background. Lisa came from a very Christian background, very Christian home. And lo and behold, 46 years later, here we are still married with these two crazy backgrounds. But the point is, Jesus, no matter what you've come from, she came from legalism, and I came from, let's live it up. And but God brought us together, and that book explains what God did in our lives and how you can make your life count for Christ as well, your marriage, your family. So, but the days of deception. Actually, Eric came out of the COVID era where I saw what was going on as you did, and I did a teaching series on that title. It was Living in the Days of Deception. So I covered deception.
But living in the D-A-Z-E.
Oh, thank you.
Days of deception. Just to be clear.
That's right.
Days
Thank
of
you.
deception.
D-A-Z-E, because everybody then and now feels like they've been smacked like a cartoon.
Yeah.
You can see the little stars and the moons going around people's heads. They feel like they're in a fog or they got smacked. And so I just took a handful of topics. Days of deception regarding Israel existing as a nation, regarding a church doctrines, regarding marriage, days of deception regarding this gender fluidity issue. I took these issues, applied it from the scripture, and it's not only for the believer, it's for the non-believer also. And I think that's why it's resonated. I mean, our sales, according to the publisher, it's been their top book that they've done, and we're grateful for that. But here's the reason why. People feel confused. They feel like they're in a daze. And so we're blessed by Secretary Mike Pompeo having written the foreword, and it's doing well.
Well, it's so interesting
Why
because
Pompeo?
I resonate with you so deeply that it's hard for me to even think like I want to.
My Pompeo.
Before I met you, before I knew about you and your church in Chino Hills, California, I had heard about you because you were one of those few pastors that knew when COVID hit and everybody's saying we got to shut the churches down, you pretty quickly said, no.
Right.
And that was a big deal because there was this deception out there that to be a Christian is just to go along with the government tell you that's the Christ-like thing to do, which it can be.
It can be.
And it can also not be. And you had the discernment to say, no, we're going to open up our church. And when I spoke at your church, I don't know when it was, but it was it blew my mind. I walk out on the stage and I see thousands of people without masks, and I thought, this is so delightfully normal. It's insane. I've never seen this. Is incredible. Like, you're just doing church, like,
Right.
And of course, in retrospect, that was exactly right. But at the time, you and your church are being vilified as super spreaders. Our friend Sean Foyt is being vilified as a super spreader. And so what was it at that time that made you see this is deception?
Super
We're going to
spreaders.
keep our church open. And I want to be clear, because you did the right thing, tons of people found you and said, who's this guy? We want to go to that church. We're interested in somebody who is being brave and whatever. And any pastor that was brave at that time, their churches have exploded, the numbers have exploded, and those who were timid are struggling to keep, well, I mean, it's amazing.
That's a fact. Eric, thank you. And listen, I can't take all the credit because when we decided to just go full bore, it should be known to everybody that in California, I invited from our pastors network. These are Baptists, Lutherans, Calvary Chapel, Methodists, doesn't matter. I asked them, will you open up your church? Will you stand? We're going to go forward with or without you guys. But listen, 1,200 pastors opened up their church on that day that we did as well. In the state of California, mind you. A lot of people don't know that. That never hit the press. So here's the thing, you guys, is that it came down to this. the Lord spoke to my heart. Look, I didn't hear rumbling. My roof didn't blow off my house. I didn't hear an audible voice. But what he said to my soul was immediately this: Jack, I've set before you an open door that no man can shut. So I picked up the phone. I called our entire staff, and I said, we're opening, and you're going to get...
What was the date, like roughly?
April 26th is
2020.
Yeah, is when I heard God speak.
No, but I'm saying, like, this is a big deal. This is right at the beginning of the COVID stuff. And you're praying, and you believe that the Lord speaks to you through the scripture to open your church very early on.
Yep.
And you obey the Lord, and you open up your church.
Yeah.
You got all these other pastors to open up their churches.
That's right.
But that's so huge. Because pastors all across the country were shutting down their churches. I know pastors that shut down their church for a year and a half.
Well, yeah, I know who you're talking about. And by the way, both of those churches, or at least both of those churches, are pretty much done now.
Look, it's actually, I mean, it's kind of Romans 8:28, right?
Yeah.
All things work together for good. Even COVID pandemic, the Lord can use that for His purposes. And what He did in that time, and has done ever since, is that directed believers to churches that they didn't know about, like your church, and they kind of thought, hey, this is great. I'm going to stay here. They got kind of planted there, and by the time their old church opened up, they were like, I'm done with that.
That's exactly correct.
And so it's kind of the free market working together for good, right? Where people chose something that works better for them, and they've decided to stay there.
Well, not only, Eric, everything yes to that, but what a lot of people don't realize is that there were many people who, like you just said, hey, my church has been closed. I'm going to go over there and see what's going on at this place. Where I'm meeting them after service, and they're telling me, I've been here for 3 weeks now. I've been here for 5 weeks now. Pastor, did I hear you correct? Did you say that I must be born again to enter the kingdom of heaven? And I said, I actually didn't say that. Jesus said it. You heard me repeat Jesus.
Yeah.
Bij Van den Borre zijn we voor het leven. Daarom krijg je bij ons minder twijfel over het ideale cadeau voor moederdag. Want gelukkig geven onze verkopers je met alle plezier advies. Dat zijn minder gênante cadeaus en meer blije mama's. Van den Borre. Voor het leven.
Yeah.
Hey, well, I've never heard that before at my church. Eric, 3 Saturdays.
That's very interesting.
3 Saturdays, we baptized 3,011 people in 3 Saturdays. People making decisions out of COVID. God may not have sent COVID, but He'll use it.
You know,
He'll use anything.
This is like the beginning of the Third Great Awakening. I'm not exaggerating. This is when the history is written of how it all started, how this revival started.
It could be.
That's how. Well, I'm just telling you that's if it hadn't been for COVID, if it hadn't been for all these other churches timidly shutting down, all of these people who were not hearing the gospel, or who were not they were not hearing something that they now began to hear, and they decided, I'm going to go with that. If it hadn't been for that, these people, so there are tons and tons of people. This is called evangelism, except it wasn't your plan, it wasn't my plan, it was the Lord's plan.
Right.
And a lot of people are planted and solid and going to churches like yours and getting fed in a way they were not getting fed before all of this went down. True. So this is good stuff, and the news is not reporting on this. I'm reporting on it. The news is not reporting on it. Of course they're not.
No, you know what? Believe it or not, when we did those baptisms, we got a phone call from one of our missionaries in Turkey, and Turkey had aired it on their national news program in Turkey, and it was very well. It was in favor of what was happening. People didn't know this in the States. They had no idea. It wasn't getting covered. So.
Well, see, there's a lot of news. I mean, this is kind of interesting. There's a lot going on that'll never get covered in the news. If you're not following the right people, you're just not going to hear about what's actually happening. And it's kind of fascinating because the cultural elites, right, these global leaders, and they themselves don't know about what is happening. It's like an underground fire going and going and going and going. They're oblivious to what is happening. And when it explodes, into reality where people can actually see it, they're going to be stunned. Where did this come from?
Yes.
What is happening? That's what's happening.
So Eric,
it's happening now.
So let's break this on your program. Okay, so Who reported this? That when Gavin Newsom said that 501c3s in the state of California, nonprofit organizations, will have to pay for elective abortions. We are not, listen, Gavin Newsom's office, we are not acknowledging the Supreme Court's decision that was made by the Hobby Lobby case. Well, I said, we're not going to fund elective abortions.
Right.
We lost our insurance coverage. At the same time, we sued the governor's office.
What? Haven't you read Romans 13? What is wrong with you, Pastor Jack Hibbs?
Exactly.
Suing the governor's office.
Exactly. You know what I did?
Holy
I appealed
cow.
to Caesar. That's what I did. I practiced Paul's appealing to Caesar.
Oh yeah, there's that passage also in the New
Also,
Testament.
there
I
comes a
appeal to
time when
Caesar.
it's better to obey God rather than man. And lo and behold, the beautiful people at ADF,
Yeah.
we beat the governor's office. We won that case, and it was not reported on one news outlet whatsoever. And I just want everybody to know that. For California, 501c3s no longer have to pay for their insurance abortions because that was overturned by
Because of Pastor Jack Hibbs being an actual leader, and also we're raising money on my program for the Alliance Defending Freedom. A lot of people don't realize they are heroes.
Absolutely.
When you are in trouble and you say we've got to go, we've got to fight this legally, we're going to appeal to Caesar, quote unquote. Where do you turn? The Alliance Defending Freedom. Total heroes.
100%.
And totally funded by people like folks listening to this program. They are total heroes. Now, if it weren't for the Alliance Defending Freedom, where would you go? Where do you, how do you find somebody to fight this who has the conviction to say, you're right, we want to fight with you? So I just want to give a shout out anytime I get the Alliance Defending Freedom, because what you did, Pastor Che got involved also in California. A number of California pastors really showed a level of leadership that is staggering to me. And you're at the head of it, our friend Rob McCoy.
Right.
And they basically said, we know what the scripture says.
That's right.
We know that Governor Newsom, you can't tell us to do that, and therefore we won't do it. We refuse to do it. But so many pastors said, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad witness going against the government. I mean, but don't you find it interesting how many pastors and how many Christian leaders across America got this wrong?
You know what, though?
It breaks my heart.
For them, it's an easy or convenient read of the scripture. When you read, they all cited Romans 13, but they didn't read it very well. It says that God has put those authorities in power to do good. Listen, when Gavin Newsom decided not to do good, then that's clearly an indicator that the mantle of God's authority is off of his shoulders. Do I respect the office of the governor? Absolutely. But when somebody takes that authority and prostitutes it, then he's no longer worthy of that position. So we said to him, it's better for us to obey God now rather than man. And this is going to be going on more and more in our America today. And again, God turns it around for good. Pastors are going to be, I believe, divinely called out to take a stand, to go against the grain, because we are in our Bonhoeffer moment. Your letter to the American church, you know that the moment I read it, I was shouting this book out to everybody in the world. You got to get this book.
Well, look, I so appreciate that you had a pastor's conference, and you made it possible. Because, I mean, I think we have to realize that the way information travels, a lot of people, you can put something out, it's happening, you put it out there, but people don't hear about it. People you thought would hear about it don't hear about it. And so this message that we're living in this moment right now, that where the American church is parallel to what the German church was under Hitler in the first years, trying about Hitler, not at the end, but in the first years,
venues across America. Hey, did you know you can learn 100 songs on piano in 1 hour? No way! All you need to learn is 4 chords. One of the things that Lewis talked about when he started to go out during World
We agreed to the following terms. You help me to keep my repository intact, and I will return the excised part of the commander's power to him.
Okay, so I finished this. I went out of the inner of second side of the threshold. I went out of there.
Say that restoring the commander's power would be dangerous
So
for the world.
I talked to that guy, whatever his name is, to this golem or whoever he is. And now let's see what to do next. I see already there are new enemies here because I killed quite a lot of things here, but they're back. Like here they are. Wallachia again and so on. Patinjali. I call them Parmigiani. Just look what one did. 371 crit. Huh. Of course.